Napa know-how.
A Napa guy knows more isn't always better, unless we're talking about full-size vans. These beasts do more than get you from A to B. They have so much space a man can live in it. With shag carpeting, waterbed, and a sweet lava lamp, these mobile abodes have all the comforts of home. With quality parts and plenty of Napa know-how, you can keep the original tiny house running longer, stronger. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how. We are the New York Knicks. I'm back in the New York groove. Well, it's the Knicks. New York. We are the New York Knicks. New York. For this new season we're about to enter, the Knicks taking no shorts, it's like winter. New York, New York.
New York be about the Knicks, huh?
But the best thing about New York City is
K-N-I-C-K-S.
Everybody say go, New York, go, New York, go!
And welcome to episode 329 of the New York Knicks podcast. I am Jay. Mark is with me as always. And we got special guest Jim Cavan on the show today. I say your last name differently every time you're on the show.
I thought
You got it this time. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. I can't tell you how much I missed that intro. It's maybe my all-time favorite podcast intro.
Thank you.
It's Cavan, not Cavan?
It is Cavan, yeah. I think.
I've been getting it wrong all this time.
That's what my parents told me, but the more I read into sort of the genealogy, the more I realize that we might actually be pronouncing it wrong. It might actually be like Cavan, which is the go-to for most people, and I've always had to correct them. And as I understand Gaelic, that's actually how it's pronounced. So I don't know what happened.
Maybe it's Cavan, and you could be like, "You're so Cavan. You think this song is about you?"
Jime Cavan.
I don't know. There's like a triangle over the A and an umlaut over the V. Like the V is actually a B. It's all messed up.
For those joining us, we're going to spend the next 40 minutes on the nomenclature behind Jim's name.
Let's not do that.
The Knicks are playing now. They're mounting a comeback. Jim, what's your take on the season so far? Is it in the sense of last year was an abomination? This year expectations weren't that high. We got a bunch of new players though. Things started off okay. They've gone downhill recently. What's your take on the season? Are you happy, sad, in between?
Yeah, in between. I don't want to say indifferent. That's the wrong word. But I feel like they are going to end up where most people predicted they would be. And I was a little bit optimistic. I think I predicted 37 wins. And it's looking like that's probably going to be unlikely. But most people had them pegged somewhere in the 30 to 35, 37 neighborhood. And that's likely where they'll end up. And they started off somewhat strong, somewhat surprising, and have just reverted back to the old Knicks, or at least the Knicks of last year, in very key ways. And I feel like the firing of Fisher, however warranted you think it was, definitely disrupted them, I feel like. Much as Fisher was a polarizing figure and maybe the players weren't responding to him in the way that Jackson wanted, I don't see how Rambis is an improvement on this front, and it's a little disconcerting that we're already getting leaks about how Jackson's wish is that Rambis keeps this job and he maintains his hold and becomes the Knicks coach for the long term. Ooh. I think that's pretty terrifying to most of us.
Yeah. They said one of the comments was behind the firing. They said it was reported that Phil felt that Fisher should have used his assistants more than he was using them. And do you think Fisher now is like, see, this is why I wasn't using Rambis?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And you wonder if Rambis maybe went to Jackson and tattled on Fisher or something like, he's not asking me my opinion. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know Rambis well enough, beyond sort of the abysmal numbers, his coaching dossier, but it just doesn't look like the long-term solution. I don't really like his demeanor. I don't hate it, but I don't really like it. His comments about Porzingis from a couple days ago were pretty alarming, particularly given what we know about how he handled Kevin Love those first few years in Minnesota. So there are things to be concerned about. At the same time, you have no idea who's leaking this shit, and we don't know what Jackson's thinking about a long-term solution. Maybe he reaches out to Thibodeau. Maybe he has another ace up his sleeve. But as the weeks wear on, it seems like the firing of Fisher maybe was a little more rash than we initially thought.
Well, I imagine the whole thing with there's more to the whole Matt Barnes thing, and then you hear about the Tim Hardaway thing, and also the team was collapsing. There's also a matter of it's all about how you get to that record, and the fact that they started off 22-22 and then like the started collapsing. I feel like Phil said this is not working. He's not getting better as a coach. Let me try to move on. And hoping that would jumpstart the team. They say, okay, we have to get serious. The guy's fired. We have to. Most teams, I feel like, win a couple games after their coach gets fired because it spurs them. And here they were like, okay, time to give up.
Yeah, and it's a slight second guessing. This isn't a severe second guessing. And a year from now, if we're in the playoff hunt, we had a couple key free agents and we're back on track. We look back at this and say, who cares? Whether Rambis is still around or not.
So, I guess he called out Porzingis in the media, which I guess was Phil Jackson thing always to call players out in the media as a way to motivate them. Do you think this was a little much, calling out a guy like Porzingis, who's been like the ultimate bright spot of the whole season?
I don't know whether it bothers KP. That's impossible to say. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Chris Herring, who said that if anything, Porzingis is harder on himself than any coach could ever be, and he's probably not going to let this bother him. At the same time, it was just an awkward way to phrase things, even if you don't think that some of his shots are within the flow of the offense. How many times have coaches called out Carmelo by name with that exact same criticism? Not too often. So the fact that it's a rookie and that, I don't know what the motivation was. Again, we had to look at what little sample size we have, and the sample size we have is an abysmal one from a head coaching perspective, and one that shows that he alienated a few young players. So that's concerning, and it warrants questioning whether you really want this guy to be stewarding arguably the most important cornerstone that we've had in 30 years,
I mean, the other stuff he said, realistically, I would like Porzingis doing more shooting from closer to the basket. I think it's hard to argue that he'd be fantastically effective close to the basket. He does sometimes shoot some ill-advised shots. A lot of stuff that a rookie would do. And maybe this is just like him saying, I'm going to hold you to a higher level. I want you to work harder and improving faster.
Sure. And I think there's a time for that. And I think that time is in the off season. And NBA history is rife with players coming back after an off season with a new weapon in their arsenal. We've seen it with Dirk. Speaking of a big guy, Amare added a really deft post game there. I believe after his first season with the Knicks, it's possible. I don't doubt for a second that Porzingis has the constitution to understand what he needs to improve, and he'll hit the ground running this summer. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he came back next fall, not only 20 pounds heavier, but with a more deft touch around the rim. I think that's something that we should expect, and I think that's something that he expects of himself.
I mean, I guess part of it also is, you're right, the timing of it. It should have been more towards the offseason, and you're calling this guy out when half your team looks like a joke at times. Like, why not call Calderon out for his lack of actually playing point guard?
Well, and part of it is these guys are half the questions these guys are getting, half the question any visiting coach is getting, any visiting player is getting, is about Porzingis. So when that's the case, inevitably there are going to be some quotes that maybe ring a little wrong,
So just speaking of other players, Herring actually wrote a piece, Chris Herring wrote a piece recently about how Calderon would be the best move they could make with him would be making him the shooting guard. Because his game right now translates better. When he shoots the ball, the only time he actually contributes is when he shoots the ball, because he actually is still a pretty good shooter. He does not create offense anymore. I was thinking about that with his article, and then thinking about Galloway, who's really not a point guard either. And I was thinking the fact that we just don't really have a point guard. The only guy who actually plays point guard, though not necessarily as well as we'd like right now, is Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they should try to move? I mean, is there something to the fact that they should say, Calderon, you should be out there looking for your own offense, playing more shooting guard, and just move him over? Would the team be better? Like, is it helpful to have Calderon dribble the ball up slowly and pass the ball and then do nothing else?
I think Calderon's destiny at this point in his career, and I hope this comes to pass for him, is to be a backup point guard on a really good team, which I think he can be. And they didn't deal him at the deadline. Maybe there's something to be done over the summer. Because I know, at this stage in his career, he probably wants to be put in a position to win. And I'm sure the abrasiveness of us in the New York media is wearing on him. And it's just an awkward trio of guards, not individually, but as they fit into this quote-unquote system. Calderon and Galloway are to an extent and to different extents combo guards. And that's fine in the triangle where not as much primacy is placed on being a quote-unquote pure point guard, which is what Grant is. But if you're playing to Grant's strengths, then you're inevitably getting away from the triangle, and the Knicks don't want to do that. So it poses all these systemic sort of questions of fit. Who fits next to who, and what offense should we be running? And these are questions that need to be sorted out. And we'll see, I think, over the summer how adamant Jackson and Rambis and whoever they hire as the head coach is really about running this particular offense. I know it's kind of morphed into a hybrid and et cetera, but do they want to try to shoehorn this offense in, or do they want to try to develop something resembling a 21st century offense? I think that'll be a huge storyline going forward.
You think this is all part of Phil Jackson's grand plan to cement his legacy by proving he was the only guy that can make the triangle work? Because look how much of a disaster it is when anyone else tries it.
No, I don't know about that. I think that's.
I think it's just joking.
Yeah, but I've heard a couple of people pose that, and I mean, he is smart like a fox enough to where if that ever came out in whatever form, a book, an accidental media blurt out, I wouldn't be surprised.
I think he's just proven that. I think more than anything, he's proven that no matter the system you have, it's very helpful to have one, if not two, top 10 players of all time on your roster at that time.
Yep.
That would be more than anything. I mean, whatever the triangle, you can run the box, the quadrangle, what do you want to run? You got Michael Jordan there or Kobe Bryant and Shaq. It's going to work a lot better.
Yep. And this triangle would look a hell of a lot better if Kevin Durant or Russell Westbrook were in it. So, do
you think people should stop talking about them already? Because they're not coming here. Are you one of the people that is a believer that they might actually come here, or do you think this is just like a one of those things we keep telling ourselves that okay, the other star will finally come here, LeBron will get here, or
it's one of the prime neuroses of Knicks fans is like this obsession with landing a top 5 superstar. It never happens. Stoudemire certainly wasn't. Melo, at the time we acquired him, you can make a case as a top 10 player, but yeah, I think it's probably a pipe dream, but you never know. It depends on how well Anthony maintains both his health and his productivity, and it depends on how big of a leap Porzingis can make. And it's going to be tough, though. I honestly don't foresee Durant going anywhere, and Westbrook is a little bit harder to peg, but you can't hinge your future on landing one of those two guys. And that's where Jackson's creativity is going to have to come into play, whether it's getting rid of Melo and getting a bunch of picks and really starting from scratch and pushing that sort of contention window down 4 or 5 more years until Porzingis is in his prime. That might end up having to be the play.
I mean, it seems like the best. I mean, generally throughout history of the NBA, most of it's been done through the draft with a little bit of adding free agents later on. For the most part, you have to get the pieces there. And it's not going to turn around overnight, even though we want it to turn around every hour. It's a tough. I'm relating to like a Mets fan. I'm a huge Mets fan. Sandy Alderson came here, said we're going to turn things around. For the first 5 years, fans wanted to like string him up, murder him. It was so awful, and then suddenly it started paying off. And you were like, "Oh my God, he's a genius! How did he know this would all work?"
Yeah.
But it's one of those things like for the Knicks, I feel like Porzingis is 19, 20 years old. Hopefully, we're not going to do anything stupid and let him go or he gets injured. You have him, he's not even going to hit his prime for another 5 years. The next 6 years, you can really like improve this roster greatly and be really ready to contend when Porzingis is coming into his prime. And that's probably the best way to actually have sustained success.
I would tend to agree. And it's the impatient bone in our being that wants the quick hit home run because we've suffered for so long, and who knows? But I think that's still the smartest play, and it's a strategy that's proven to be the most consistently reliable in terms of maintaining some semblance of competitiveness, and it's a system that Dolan has been really reluctant to lean on over the years, and I don't know how much patience he has, or whether he has the kind of patience to really see something like that through.
And like just thinking about that bigger picture, then I see the microcosm that you watch Rambis right now, and not that Grant is necessarily going to be this great guy who's going to lead us anywhere. You see him sacrificing minutes for Grant to give Calderon more minutes, or put Sasha in the game, or just try to win at all costs. When you're kind of saying, well, is this really going to help us? So if we miss the playoff by 5 games versus we miss the playoffs by like 10 games versus trying to actually develop a roster?
I think they honestly believe they still have a chance, which is ludicrous. And I think we're trending in like the 2% territory now. Last time I looked at the numbers, I mean, there's no chance that we're going to make the playoffs. And I don't know whether they just don't believe that, or whether they feel like, with a lot of these coaches, and a lot of these hard-ass coaches in particular, and I think Rambis sort of fits this bill, and you saw a little bit of this when he was in Minnesota, withholding playing time from a really young player is a way for them to prove a point, whatever that point may be. And it's a tough balancing act, I think. This is not excusing it, but it's a tough balancing act to both hold the player accountable and give him the reps necessary to be better. And that's what good coaches do. They find that balance. Rambis has proven unable to do that thus far. I don't know if he's willing to change. It'll be fascinating to see, particularly as it concerns Grant.
It's weird, though. I understand that. I get the idea of like the playing time is the key thing you can hold over their head to try to make them improve their game. But at the same time, the guys that are playing up in front of him are playing awful. I get if a guy's playing in front of him that you really like. The guy in front of him is playing pretty well. He has to show he can take the guy's spot. But when you give minutes to Sasha, you're almost like making a joke. Hey, you have to play better, and haha, Sasha gets to play in front of you, even though the guy plays like garbage.
Yeah, some combination of that, and well, he knows the system. So the argument being, by plugging in guys who quote unquote really know the system, then that will make everyone around them better understand the system, and that's just not how it works. Particularly when they're playing as badly as Sasha Vujacic has just played. You know, when you have a 3 PER, how is that really helping the guys around you learn the triangle system? I'm putting thoughts and words into Rambis' head and mouth, but I feel like that's part of the consideration here. It's part of the consideration why they brought him on. He's a great locker room guy, quote unquote, and he knows the system. And having guys who know the system make everyone else learn it more easily.
I was going through when I watched the Toronto game, I was just writing a list of things that just drive me crazy. And this week, just for people listening right now, the Knicks played Toronto, came close to winning, but they lost. Beat the Magic, was great. And is that the only games of the week, Jay, or any others?
Yeah, that was it. Oh, fun Sasha fact. The last time he hit a shot was February 7th.
When I was thinking about Sasha, I
watched that game.
Good teams have veteran leadership. Good teams have good locker room guys. Bad teams just have old guys that can't play anymore. And guys that stink.
Yeah.
That's what it comes
down to. And the Knicks are a bad team. I'm not saying they're a bad team because they have old guys who can't play. That's not the only reason, but it's
that veteran leadership and a good locker room guy on a good team that actually means something, on a bad team that's a euphemism for, well, he can't play, but here's why he's around here, because we promise there's intangibles that's really helping, even though no one can see it and there's no evidence of it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it speaks to something that I've thought way too often about, and that is Phil worships Red Holzman, and I talk about this in a recent article I wrote, but there's a scene in the 30 for 30 documentary when the Garden was eaten, and Phil's talking about Red Holzman's first day as head coach of the Knicks and how he took the play sheets and just rolled them up and threw them away. And so this is what I think about plays. You know, I think you play together. I think you play defense, and everything sort of feeds off of that. And he was raised in a system that put so much primacy on being creative and being flexible and never doing the same thing twice. And now we see this Phil Jackson at 70 plus years old who is so set in his ways that he has become the thing that he hated. And I know that's getting way too deep into sort of social psychological minutia, but it's something that I thought a lot about, like how stubborn he's become in a lot of ways over the years.
I do think there's something also to the extent of he's had so much success with his ways that you become even more inflexible about it because you're like, I know better because look how much success I've had.
Yeah.
Why do the Knicks always pick guys who have a system that they expect everyone to adapt to as opposed to like adapting their system to the players they have?
That's a great question. With D'Antoni, I think it was just the shiny new toy. It was this super exciting, super engaging offense that, in the Garden, the Mecca, in front of that crowd, was going to set the world on fire. And with the exception of the 2010-2011 season, that really never happened. And yeah, it's an issue. And I think, let's give Phil some credit. His first choice was Steve Kerr, and we've seen how that worked out. Now, you'd easily make the argument, well, how much does Steve Kerr really have to do with the Warriors' success? But it's not nothing. It's more than zero. And,
right.
There is a reason why Kerr was his first choice, and maybe it has something to do with sort of his open-mindedness. Knowing the triangle, understanding the triangle, being willing to implement aspects of the triangle, but within the confines of something a little more dynamic.
Obviously it's working well in Golden State, and you could say Kerr must be doing something. Obviously he can't make Steph Curry be able to hit shots with his eyes closed from 50 feet away because he can just do that anyway. But the team is definitely better than they were under Mark Jackson. So you have to give him some credit for that.
And Mark Jackson was not a terrible coach.
Right. The team
he wasn't good. He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible. I don't think he's better than Derek Fisher, I think.
Well, that's not a high bar. And the team was they won like 50 games under Mark Jackson. It wasn't like they were a bad team, and they were a team. You have to say they took the next level, the next leap under Steve Kerr, and that's something. Whatever. It's also weird that we have to always pick coaches. It seems now under Phil Jackson we have to always take coaches that are within his world of people he knows well, which eliminates a guy like Thibodeau, which is kind of frustrating. Instead, we have to get like a Rambis or a Fisher had no experience.
But a number of people have talked about this. Like Thibodeau ran elements of the triangle in Chicago,
right?
And he's a Garden guy. He was an assistant to Van Gundy, and I guess he leaked through a source that he would love nothing more than to come back to the Garden. Who knows how true that is? But if you're willing to be flexible, he's the kind of guy that you're willing to be flexible for, because he'll bring back that emphasis on defense in a tangible, strategically meaningful way. And Knicks fans love nothing more than defense. It harkens back to the days of Riley, and I just think that's the move. Whether they do it or not, we'll see. But he's been a free agent for a while now, and I'm sure he's chomping at the bit to get back in the game. And what better place than the Madison Square Garden?
Be an amazing. It would be. You don't never know what's going to actually happen, but it would be nice to have a coach who has a real track record of winning. Not a like a style I have to play this kind of weird style that you guys have to adapt to. A guy that they think should work out. And they don't work out on him. You at least go like, well, we have a good coach. The coaching is not the issue.
Yeah,
Adam.
Yeah.
I was thinking also just when you mentioned before about the Knicks and their belief that they can still make the playoffs. I was thinking of that scene from you guys have seen Dumb and Dumber, right? Mm-hmm. That scene when she's like, how about what are my chances with you? 1 in 1 million or 1 in 1 billion? He's like, you're saying I still have a chance. Do you think the Knicks watched that scene and didn't get it was like a comedy? Oh yeah, that's exactly. If you 1 in a million, you still have a shot.
Well, there's a difference between what you're telling the press, what you're telling the fans, and what you believe in your heart of hearts. I don't believe Rambis is dumb enough to think that they actually have a chance. But you want to put on airs. You want to put on an air. You want to exude an air of positivity, both to your fans and your players, to keep morale high. And I get it. It's just when it starts to affect how you're playing guys, when you're playing guys, and who you're playing, and then you have to start to wonder.
Do you think that contributed to Fisher getting fired when he just like said the emperor has no clothes? We're not trying to make the playoffs here. It's not that important.
Yeah. People cited that as one of the things that irked Jackson, but who knows what the brunt of the offenses were and what the straw was. Like it's impossible to say. Maybe we'll never know.
So I mentioned before, I was watching the Toronto game. I made a list of things that drove me crazy. I just want to get your comment on some of these things, if you don't mind. So I've noticed when the Knicks on defense, there's so often you see a guy that's open, and then I will wind back with DVR, and I'll see the guy that was covering him just wandered away from him. Have you noticed the Knicks just wander away from the guys they're covering all the time? Like you stand behind the arc, it's like the Knicks think there's a force field and they can't cover you anymore.
Oh, they definitely have. And it's because we watch them, obviously, more than any other team, but they have really, really offensive lapses at times. And that gets to communication. It gets to desire and hustle and all the rote superlatives. But more than anything, it's about communication. And it's a problem that's been happening for years. The inability to defend the three-point line, the complete lack of or a complete lack. I mean, Gallo is a decent perimeter defender. Calderon's a train wreck. Vujacic is a train wreck. Grant he's quick and he's athletic, but he's often making the wrong decisions. And the same problems that have plagued us for seasons.
It just seems to me if you just stayed with your man. I understand the teams run more complicated offenses, so you have to get over picks and everything else. But if you just, at the very least, if wherever your guy is standing, you stayed relatively near him, the Knicks would play better basketball. It's so often the guy just they wander away from the guy, even if he's not behind the 3-point line, they wander away from the guy, and then suddenly the guy has a layup under the basket. You're like, who was covering him? Or wind back, oh, Calderon was supposed to be covering him 10 seconds ago and just gave up. I also find the Knicks also, I've never seen guys all chase the ball like they're all a bunch of golden retrievers. It's so often you see 4 guys just go the guy's dribbling, 4 guys will collapse on him, and then everyone else is open.
Yeah. Say what you will about Woodson and his switch on everything defense, but it did make for a slightly more sturdy perimeter defense. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's a pretty awful thing to say that Woodson's defense was a better idea than what we have now.
Wasn't a good coach or a great coach? No, but was he terrible? I don't think he was terrible. I mean, a team won 54 games, and
they did.
They weren't them.
You can't argue with the success. Yes, I agree.
No, he's done some things. I wouldn't be surprised if he got another go at it. He's not very creative. He's not going to win you a championship, but watching Rambis and Fisher makes you pine for those days a little bit.
What does it say about our coaches, though, that they all leave the Knicks to become assistant coaches?
Well, he's got a pretty cushy gig now with the Clippers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he just has good seats.
Well, I mean, D'Antoni did leave and become the coach of the Lakers, and after enough Laker fans killed themselves, they got rid of him.
True.
Poor Mike D'Antoni, man. You can go back to 2007 and the travesty in the Spurs series, but you can make an argument that D'Antoni deserved one championship. Just for what he did for the game.
Well, I think the Suns got robbed one year. I mean,
yeah, it was 07, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to be said also in the right system with the right players. You can be a really great coach with the right players and then have it just not work with anyone else.
Yep.
Another thing driving me crazy is they still walk the ball up too often. I've never seen a team wait for the other team to get their defense set up before starting their offense every time. Does that drive you crazy at all, how they walk the ball up all the time?
you remember the opening game against the Bucks, and they were getting out in transition and getting all these easy buckets, and you're like, yeah, man, 2015-16 Knicks, like up tempo, let's push it, get into the triangle when all options are exhausted, and let's run. And that lasted like 3 games. And I believe they're still. I haven't looked at the pace stats in a while, but I'm assuming they're still bottom 3 in that department. And again, it's just not a functioning 21st century offense. And maybe better players improve that with the same system, but I feel more like it's a combination of better players and a better system, or at least a more dynamic system.
I noticed the other night Cavan and Porzingis had 2 back-to-back plays where they were like they did pick and roll, or maybe it wasn't back-to-back, but they had 2 pick and rolls that worked great, and then they just never went back to it.
Mm-hmm.
The aversion to the pick and roll just drives me insane because it seems like with a guy like Porzingis, the pick and roll would work fantastic. And there was one also, I think, in the Orlando game where Melo and Porzingis had a fantastic pick and roll play.
I'd have to look at the synergy numbers, but I would surmise that any play that involves Porzingis in a pick and roll or a pick and pop is one of the more efficient plays that the Knicks can run. They haven't run a lot of them, but I'd be willing to wager that
there was an
like
article
a top 5 play in terms of efficiency. And why they don't go to it more, it speaks to that stubbornness. Fisher talked a couple of times about how he's not a huge fan of pick and roll. It's incredible. And yeah, particularly given Porzingis' skill set, he's not a reliable roll man yet. He still needs to get stronger. He still needs to develop his touch around the rim. But at the very least, you can run a few pick and pops with him in every quarter and make the defense play to him. Because even if they close out, he still has the ability to drive. He has great vision on the kick out. And instead, he's often forced to find his own shot in the offense. And it's ironic that Rambis yells at him for that. But it's an offense where you're not getting a ton of screens set for you, particularly after you have the ball, and he's making the most of it and then getting scoring for it.
I also find it's weird because they criticize like Porzingis. They're like he's not really good at creating his own shot, and I'm like, oh, because there are a lot of guys that were 7-3 in the history of the NBA who can create their own shot. It's the point of like you don't ask Shaq to create his own shot. You got him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Not that Porzingis is like Shaq or anything, but it seems to me you should be working as hard as possible to set him up because he's a guy that can really finish for you if you could just set more screens or.
And I understand the perspective of bringing him along slowly and not putting too much on him too soon. I get that, and I'm totally fine with him getting 14 shots a game when Karl Anthony Towns is getting 20. I get why they're doing it, and I think you're only going to invite trouble if you're asking them to do too much. That being said, they could be a little more creative about the situations that they're putting him in, and not having him have to freelance at every turn.
Yeah, I just think it could be a little more team basketball. We could set him up. I kind of think of the triangle some ways. Like I get that it's supposed to create better shots. But sometimes I feel like the Knicks are saying, "Hey, we don't have as much talent as every team in the NBA, but we're going to try to win with one hand tied behind our back. Also, we're going to make it even harder for us to win."
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's a combination of everything. It's the talent, it's the offense, it's the lack of creativity, it's the coaching.
All the things that'll lead us to a title eventually.
Exactly.
The other thing of those thinking of Porzingis is that Porzingis and Lopez, sometimes they get the ball down low, but a lot of times I've noticed they pass their big men, I feel like, too far from the basket. And I get if you're maybe setting a Porzingis up for a 3, but sometimes they'll give the ball to Porzingis or Lopez at the top of the key, and they're going to pass, and it just becomes, what was the point of passing to, especially Lopez? What was the point of passing to Lopez at the top of the key? What was he going to do with the ball besides pass it off?
Well, they're hoping he makes quick decisions, and for the most part, Porzingis is a little more adept at that. I feel like Lopez holds the ball a little too long sometimes. I mean, everyone's prone to it. But yeah, it's.
I sometimes feel like when they pass the ball to Lopez up at the top of the screen, it becomes like Lopez is trying to inbound the ball again. No one covers him. Everyone just covers everyone else, and he's like, and it leads to a lot of turnovers.
Yeah, and Calderon in particular is really bad about missing the open guy, and he does it like 3 times a game, and it's really blatant. And there's a reason why Jose Calderon is Jose Calderon. He's not Chris Paul. He's not going to thread the needle the way you want your starting point guard to thread the needle. And even Grant shows flashes of that, and he showed flashes of it at Notre Dame. So I don't know. I keep going back to Calderon. I mean, so much starts at the point guard position, and I'm fine with him being a backup even on our team, but he cannot be the starting point guard next season, and I don't believe he will be.
What about like putting Grant and Calderon out there? Like Grant is the point guard and Calderon is the shooting guard, and you have a little bit of like the veteran guy at the kind of bounce. It's kind of a 2-point guard system where Calderon is instructed to look more for his offense.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I'd be curious to look at the numbers, what their plus minus is when the two of them are on the floor together.
I guess that's fair. I can't imagine there's that much even time where they're on the floor together. But
no, it hasn't been a lot. It hasn't been a lot. But yeah, that would benefit Grant to play alongside, a shooter like that for sure. I mean, it opens up possibilities for him as a penetrator. And
I also find Calderon also, to a certain extent, what beyond the fact that he's not great at creating, is that sometimes he'll pass the ball at the detriment to the offense. Like there'll be 10 seconds left on the shot clock, and he'll be perfectly open, but feel like he has to still pass to someone else, and he'll pass in a situation where you're like, well, Calderon, you could have just shot the ball there, and now the guy you passed to wasn't necessarily ready, or you made more time run the clock for no reason.
Yeah.
I also just watched. I have the background of the game on right now, and I saw Sasha just chasing. He's on the floor, which makes me angry enough. And just chasing someone on defense and not catching up to the guy. The guy scored. Has Sasha ever stayed with his man?
There was a stretch there of about 3 games where he wasn't playing awful defense. And I haven't really watched much of the last 3 games, to be honest. So a lot of stuff going on with work and whatnot, but I really just don't understand what he provides at any given time. I think I've seen him make 2 consecutive shots once this season. I don't remember what game that was, but he went off one quarter in a game that I'm assuming we lost. There
was on defense. What drives me crazy also is that like he'll be covering someone and the guy will fake to say the right, and Sasha will throw his entire body to the right, and the guy will just run like there'll be a clear lane where the Sasha used to be standing right to the basket. Yeah. And I've never seen a guy do that more often, get faked out.
He's got to have some dirt on someone. I don't know if it's Rambis or Jackson or.
I mean,
neither would surprise me.
Do you think Chris Smith watches it and be like, I mean, I get like you guys didn't want to give J.R.'s brother. Chris is J.R.'s brother, right? Am I right?
Yeah. Chris Smith just signed with the St. John Mill Rats of the Canadian Basketball League.
Oh, no shit. Where are they now? I was going to say, do you think Chris watches Sasha and be like, well, I'm as good as him. This is bullshit.
Okay, so as amazing as this sounds, Sasha Vujacic is 3 times the player right now than Chris Smith ever was.
I think you're correct. I mean, you can always think Chris Smith is probably 800 times the player that I am. Doesn't mean that he should be in the NBA.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, he's 1,000 times the player, and that's fine. I mean, he is who he is. It's kind of surprising. I remember watching him at Louisville, and not to say that I thought he would ever be like a starting caliber player in the NBA, but it was pretty jarring watching how horribly he struggled, even like at Summer League, after coming out of Louisville.
I mean, part of it is
just
let's
not beat up on Chris Smith. That's not why we're here.
No. There was an article, I don't know if you saw, I was on a fan sided about the Spurs and how they maximize three-point shooting. And how they've changed their approach to three-point shooting, where it's more about them trying to penetrate and having three-point and being a result of the play. But they're not looking for the three necessarily. And it's showing they don't shoot nearly as many threes as they have in past seasons, but they're one of the top teams in percentage making. I think they're right behind Golden State for what percentage they're actually making.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it was an interesting idea of like, well, I mean, the Spurs, obviously, they're always smarter than everyone else. But it was an interesting thing of trying to like, when I watch the Knicks, sometimes I just see them, there's so many plays where the Knicks just settle immediately for an open 20-foot shot. Or they say shoot a three right when there's like 5 seconds, like 3 seconds have expired on the shot clock. It's like their first thing they do is just jack it up because they're open. And it drives me insane.
It's because the offense is so rote and stagnant that they expect not to get that many open looks later in the offense. So the first one they get, they're going to shoot. And again, I'm speaking, I'm digging way too deep into the psychology of that. But it stems from just how predictable the offense is, and the Knicks basically saying mid-range jump shots are okay, and mid-range jump shots are okay as long as they're good mid-range jump shots and you make them, But to sort of fancy yourself as rebellious or forward-thinking because you're going to embrace the mid-range jump shot while everyone else is chucking threes seems counterproductive.
I don't know if you guys have watched the Thunder Warriors game yesterday, but I found it jarring how much the ball moved around. I guess I've been watching too many Knicks games, but watching both of those teams move the ball around constantly, I was like, oh, this is what basketball is supposed to look like, huh?
I missed that game. They looked like it was like from the score, like it was a great game, and I read online it seemed like a great game. I looked at Draymond Green's stat line, could be the most insane stat line I've ever seen of any player in the history of the NBA. Did you guys see his stat line?
No.
His stat line, let me pull this up. This is the most insane stat line you've ever, because it basically, 2 seconds to pull this up. He had, I think, 0 points or 2 points in the game, which sounds like he had 2 points in the game, so that should be a pretty awful stat line. He has 2 points on 0 for 8 shooting, but then he has 14 rebounds, 14 assists, 6 steals, and 4 blocks. That is the most insane stat line I've ever heard in my life.
I guarantee if you filter that on Basketball Reference, that'll be the only thing that comes up.
I mean, who scores 2 points and has an amazing game?
That's bananas.
And he played really good defense as well.
Well, about the ball movement thing, because it is fascinating, and I could be grasping at straws here, but the triangle is notorious for being a difficult offense to learn, an even more difficult one to master. And in a game of split-second decisions, when you're thinking, even if it's for a split second, about where you have to be when the ball moves, that inherently slows down the offense. Just that split second of hesitation. Now, obviously, every offense, you need to know where to be when the ball moves. You need to know where to be when X happens, when Y happens, when Z happens. But it seems like even if you put the fastest players in the world into this offense, it would still feel slower. Does that make sense?
Well, I think part of, just in fairness, the Knicks every year assemble 8 or 9 new players they've never had on their roster, and they have to learn to play together. And I feel like a system that you just described for the triangle, you need a roster that's been playing together for years with this system to really maximize it.
Yep.
Because right now you have to think too much to really make it work.
Yep.
And next year we'll probably have like 7 new guys.
Which is what makes their roster construction have such a small margin for error, because you need to keep guys around in order to, quote unquote, maintain that system. But you need better players. So what's that balance?
Right. If next year they're saying, well, he's not very good, but he knows the system, we're going to bring Sasha back, I might shoot myself. But yeah, it's a tough. I mean, it's always a matter of it's hard to also look at a system that's only been very successful with some of the best players in the history of the NBA and go, well, that system can translate to every other team. I mean, there's a reason why other teams aren't necessarily running this system.
Sasha just got a steal.
Wow.
And a hockey assist.
Oh, good for him.
Sorry.
No.
I thought that was an important programming note.
That is an important programming note. Actually, I don't want to hear that thing, because then he'll get more minutes.
Yeah, no, he just guaranteed himself a starting spot in the next game, actually.
Oh, wonderful.
His streak of not hitting a shot has continued, though.
I also noticed basically the point guards, whoever they have, they're so often, I just think the Knicks do a lot of lazy things. From the shooting, the minute they get, the second they get an open 20-foot shot, they just shoot that shot and don't look for anything better. To the point guards, so often they dribble the ball up slowly and then pass before they ever even get to the arc. There's very little like attempt. I don't know if it's like just the players are tired, but it's very little attempt to actually just like cross the 3-point line and then try to pass. Try to like break down the defense at all.
Well, Jose Calderon can't.
Right.
And
once in a while he does, though. Once in a while he does.
well, he's got a good hand. I mean, there's a reason why he has one of the highest or lowest, one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the league. He holds on to the ball, and
I look at his past stats. I understand he's a little older now, but like for so many years, he was getting 8 assists a game, no problem. He never. At no point was he ever a great defender, but he used to be a really good point guard. I don't remember watching him play all those years, but like, what was so? Was he breaking guys down? Was he breaking down the defenses more then, or what?
He wasn't 34.
a lot of those years he was playing with Bosch, like prime Bosch. That helped. And that was a good team they had in Toronto there for a couple of years.
Yeah, no, they definitely were a good team.
Yeah, poor Jose. I feel bad. We've just been ragging on him this entire time. But I like Jose, and like I said, I feel like his destiny is and should be as a backup on a good team. And maybe there's a universe in which he's a really good backup on our team, and the Knicks are really good. And I don't know what they can get for him. You know, that's the other thing. They're not going to get first for him, obviously. And, you know, maybe they get an expiring in the second rounder, but it'll be interesting to see what they do with him.
I just saw D. Will had a nice break to the basket. Why did he disappear for like 15 games? I feel like he was playing really. He had a good stretch where he was playing really well, and then just went away for like 10 or 15 games, maybe during that losing streak, and now suddenly he's back.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Their rotations have been a mess all year, and I don't know if it's an accident that D. Will's dearth of playing time has overlapped with Rambis coming to the floor. I don't know if Rambis doesn't like him as much as Fisher does. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, he had disappeared before that, but
always seemed to pop back up and have a stretch of really good 3 or 4 games. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he handles this summer. I imagine he's earned himself a little bit bigger of a payday if he wants it. So
yeah,
probably won't pick up his option and become a free agent.
What do you think the goals for the rest of the season should be for this team outside of making the playoffs?
I think it's developing the young guys. That should be the goal. I don't know if it will be the goal or whether it'll be even a point of emphasis for Rambis, but it should be about working guys in, finding a coherent rotation, but rotations wherein the young guys can learn to play together. And the principal young guys being Porzingis, Grant, and Galloway. I mean, I feel like they're probably a part of the future unless something crazy happens, but it's got to be about, it sounds cliche, but just ending on a high note and going into the summer with a little bit of momentum and seeing what you got in your young guys, because building this team into a contender is going to be the highest of high wire acts, and you need to be able to utilize and make the most of the cheap talent that you have. That's just today's NBA.
I mean, so of the guys, obviously there are players that we know we're hoping are part of our future. We know Porzingis is going to be hopefully part of our future. Melo's here to stay, part of our future for now, or at least the interim future. What are some of these guys on the bench? Do you think a guy like D. Will, is he part of our bench, or is he someone that won't be here next year? I'm not sure if he's signed. I think
my guess is that he won't be here next year, unless he decides to pick up his option, which is possible. But with the cap going up and given his sort of bounce back year and how well he's sort of carved a niche, I feel like he can go out and fetch more money somewhere else. But, maybe he does the Knicks a solid for giving him a chance and sticks around. O'Quinn's been a disappointment, obviously, so it'll be interesting to see how he factors in going forward. And Serafin also a massive disappointment. I was expecting a little more. I mean, he's just a black hole on offense.
What about Lance Thomas? For a while, had been one of the guys who are like, wow, I can't believe how good he's been playing.
What's his contract?
I have no idea. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Jay, any idea?
His contract is currently last year minimum salary 1.6.
Oh, okay. He was on 1 year. He was on a 2 year last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's obviously going to get more money going next year.
Yeah. I don't know. Knicks obviously really like him for good reason. He's put in the work. He is, by all accounts, a really likable guy. And does things when he's out there. Plays both ends of the floor. Never tries to do too much. I'd like to see him stick around. He's the kind of guy you want as sort of a, eighth, ninth man on a decent team, maybe 10th man, but a rotation guy.
I mean, just a comment on salary cap. Just the Knicks only have so much money to spend next year. Do you think it's fair that the Cleveland gets to spend $40 million more than the Knicks do this year? I think that's the difference. The Knicks are around $75 million. They encounter about $108 million.
Yeah.
Does that make it fair in the NBA to have teams I looked at and people said I'm bitching about this for no reason, that I shouldn't be bitching about this, but all the best teams get to spend the most money, and all the worst teams get to spend the least money, with rare exceptions. This is salary cap.
How much is Cleveland over the cap though?
Well, they're $108 million, so whatever the salary cap, I guess.
Yeah,
they're like
significantly.
$40 million.
And they're going to be the repeater soon, so they're going to be paying a massive amount.
Right, but I mean, if Dolan was allowed to, he probably would. That's the one thing I don't think.
I don't think you would hesitate if you felt like that was the move.
If they said you just pay a tax on it and you can spend $50 million more, we'd have a better team. I feel like if we got to spend as much as Cleveland did, we'd probably be in the playoffs at least.
Yeah, but it's how you get there, though.
I mean, we know I get the whole bird right thing. I just think it's stupid.
I think maybe you get one player that could do it. I just have a team. I get if you want to have one guy who remain in the team, but I have a whole team where everyone's like a bird rights, and the salary cap becomes a joke.
It's like the bird rights were for Larry Bird, and now people are using it on players like Varejao.
Steve Novak got to use the bird rights. Steve Novak is not Larry Bird.
Right.
Well, I feel like Cleveland's massive spending is going to be for naught. So maybe not the best example, but the rising cap helps every team, right? But I feel like it helps the bigger market teams a little more. And obviously, being in a big market isn't the automatic magnet that it used to be, but it still is. And Madison Square Garden is still an attractive thing. And I don't foresee necessarily Westbrook or Durant coming here, but Mike Conley, certainly possible.
What do you think about Conley? Do you think the Knicks should go for him?
I think they'll make a run at him. Yeah. Yeah.
It would be a pretty solid addition. He wouldn't solve all our problems, but we'd have a lot better point guard. And his contract would basically be, as someone pointed out on our last show, if you sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal, his contracts wouldn't be that different than Melo. You'd have him around the same amount of time you have Melo. So even though he's aging, you had an aging Melo anyway the whole time. Like you were kind of basically going for trying to win anyhow at that point.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit. Can you say that again?
Sorry. Someone pointed out that the contracts kind of align in the sense if you sign him to a 4 year max deal, 3 of those years Melo would be there. So the idea of saying, hey, we're going after another aging player, well, we already have aging Melo at that time anyway. So it's not like we're going fully young anyway. So at least you're trying to maximize those Melo years.
Yeah, that would be the goal. If we traded Melo, ahead of the draft, for example, I don't think Conley would be as big of a target.
Do you think?
I don't think he'd come here.
Would you say that somewhere on Earth, every hour of every day, there's a new rumor about Melo being traded?
It certainly seems that way.
What do you think about the Boston one? the Celtics came out and just said we were very close to acquiring a star player at the deadline, and now we're going to let it leak out that it was that the star player was your team's player. Like they can't.
So, yeah.
It just seemed like it could be Melo. It could have been Okafor. It could have been. It's like they're trying to spread bad blood everywhere.
It's a good strategy.
Yeah, I heard a rumor that they reached out to the Knicks interested in Melo. I don't know whether the Knicks just hung up outright or if they. And Melo said he wasn't approached about waiving his no trade clause, and I don't think he would have. As good as Boston is, as much potential as they have, I don't think Melo looks at them like the kind of team that he would waive his no trade clause for.
I think he would have
He would waive his no trade clause for the Cavs, for the Clippers. Who else?
Lakers?
Possibly the Heat, because there are other factors that play into it other than sort of how close they are to being a contender, whether his friends are on the team. There's just different optics that stars look at these things through. You know what I mean? So
right.
Boston would have been a great situation for him, honestly. I mean, Stevens is already a top 5 coach. They have a great system. They have a great sort of sneaky deep team, and within a couple of years they could have been in real contention. But I don't know. Do you guys think that he waived it, or I mean he just wasn't approached about it, or Jackson just hung up, or how do you think that all played out, if it played out at all?
My guess would be that whatever the offer the Celtics made wasn't good enough to approach him.
Yeah, like maybe it was just one first round, or like Phil wanted 3, they offered 2, or they offered 1, Phil wanted 2, kind of thing.
Right. I think there were probably preliminary discussions. Whatever they offered wasn't something where like Phil was like, it's worth even really like going hard on this because we're not getting where we want. And the approach, the trade Melo and only get 1 pick is not going to make sense for us. That I assume it's something along those lines. I assume if they made a legitimate offer that would made sense, I don't know. Do you think Phil would trade Melo if he got a good offer?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think if he had an offer he couldn't refuse, and it was a team that Melo waived, absolutely, I think they would work that out.
I think teams are still used to swindling the Knicks on trade deals, so they just call in with lowball offers, forgetting that like Phil's there now.
Oh, probably, yeah. Probably.
The Nets probably called and said, "We'll give you Bargs for Melo." You really not going to do this?
Where's Bargs going to go now, by the way?
Europe.
Yeah, Europe. Do you think an NBA team's going to sign Bargs?
He'll probably be the MVP of the EuroLeague like 10 years in a row.
Yeah.
Can you believe how bad that trade was? I mean, when you think back at it, like when Jay had mentioned to me that there were 2nd-round picks involved, and I had forgotten all about that. And I was like, wait a second, we gave a 1st-round and 2nd-round players, 2nd-round picks and players for him?
2 first-round picks.
No, it was 1 first-round pick, 2 2nd-round.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
And then 3 players on top of that for a guy who was going to get bought out like 2 weeks later.
No, you don't want to happen. I'm like, this isn't going to work out well.
No, I don't think
I was cautiously optimistic. What do you do, like 26 at the time? So arguably hadn't reached his prime yet. Maybe a new city, new environment rejuvenates him. One where he's not, the number 1 option.
Everyone had to talk themselves into it. Everyone said right away, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." Wait, stretch guy. He was a number 1 pick. We all tried to talk ourselves into it, and then we knew really fast this was going to be a disaster.
Everyone looked at that one good season he had like 4 years ago, and they're like, "Well, maybe he could do that again."
And then we were like, "Oh well, 2016 pick. I mean, like the Earth's going to end in 2015, so like we don't have the Mayans said it's never going to happen, so don't worry about it." I don't know. It was just like
that'll go down as one of the all-time great swindles for sure.
I can't think of a worse trade the Knicks have ever made.
Well, Jim, I know you said you had to go after 45 minutes, so if you got to go, just let us know.
We appreciate your time on the show. This has been great.
I mean, we're not kicking you off.
No, we're not kicking you off. You can stay, but we also want to
That's all right. That would only be the 3rd time this week I've been kicked off the podcast. So.
We just want to be cognizant and not have you be like looking for your cue to get off the show and like we're in 3 hours.
Right. It's like, hey, why don't we just ask you 45 more minutes of questions? You don't mind, right?
We've got a whole list of
Yeah, well, it looks like
questions.
looks like the Knicks are going to screw the pooch again, and yeah, sorry we couldn't have spoken under better circumstances, but
Yeah, it was a pretty, I guess, I guess we were very negative, which is we usually are pretty negative because we talk about the Knicks.
This is a Knicks podcast.
Here's a question. Someone had asked me this, and I said I think this is actually will happen. Say 5 years from now, Porzingis. Do you think he'll be a top 5 player? Do you think he has potential to be a top 5 player in 5 years?
it certainly has the potential. Yeah. I'm not going to say it's likely because there's so much young talent in this league, and it's just impossible to say. But he has that potential, certainly.
If you had a bet,
I feel safer saying top 10 than top 5, obviously.
I would say if you had a bet, you bet $50. You have to get the right 5. Would you say he's top 5, 6 through 10, 11 through 15 in 5 years?
In 5 years, I would say 25. Yeah, I would say between. Tough. I'd say top 12.
Okay.
The top 12 player.
Which would be pretty good.
15 almost feels like shortchanging, particularly given how much I love the kid and how phenomenal I think he can be. But there's just so much talent, and I would say, between 10 and 15.
Which gives me,
I feel safe as saying, but it would not surprise me in the least if you were a top 5 player.
Yeah, I feel like even if he's a top 15 player, it's a lot to build around. We do have a bright future. It's just hard to see it through all the negatives right now. We're very early on in rebuilding, and we have to kind of realize that.
Yep.
Is that your attempt?
That's exactly
to
it. For as badly as this season has gone, for as weird a roller coaster as it's been, we should do a better job of keeping things in perspective and realize that we maybe landed the steal of this draft, and a draft that could prove to be an historically great one.
Right.
Even to look forward to.
And Towns looks amazing also. And I hate that we have to keep comparing him, Porzingis, to Towns. But in Towns for him at least, he also has he's kind of like the focal point. Him and Wiggins, but he's very much more the focal point of the offense, and he has a real point guard that kind of makes it a little bit easier for him. And there's also no pressure because the team is terrible to begin with.
Yeah, I think he's the better player. I don't think it's that arguable at this point. And it's likely that he will always be the better player. But you just never know how these guys develop, how injuries play a role, team construction, all of it. It's just impossible to predict. Would it be the most shocking thing in the world to me if Porzingis turned out to be the better player 10 years from now? No, it wouldn't. But I'm not betting the house on it.
And Jay will hate this comparison, but if Towns is the LeBron of this draft and Porzingis is the Dwayne Wade, I'd be very happy.
I think we'd all be happy with that. Yeah.
Jay hates Dwayne Wade, but beyond that,
it's all right. He won 3 championships, so I'll take it.
He's kind of good.
He's kind of good.
Do you think Golden State gets it done? They break the record, go undefeated in the playoffs, and become the greatest team ever?
Oh, wow, this is perfect. This will give me a chance to plug my article for tomorrow. Yeah, so tomorrow on the Cauldron, my piece, 5 Keys to Stopping the Golden State Warriors, is going up. I don't want to give away all 5 of them.
Can I guess?
I will say that one of them is to poison them.
I was going to try to guess them. I was going to say one of them is not giving them the correct time of the game. I think they win. I think they win 75 games, and I think they roll to the championship, barring injury. Obviously, nobody can stop these guys. They're the most unstoppable force I've ever seen on a professional basketball court, and it's a sight to behold. And I think we're really fortunate to be able to witness it. My number 2 for stopping them, Jeff Gillooly. Do you guys remember him?
Is that Nancy Kerrigan's?
That is a Tanya Harding,
yeah.
Nancy Kerrigan reference. Yes, I'm going Olympic ice skating references. Poison would be a great one also.
I mean, not like kill them, but, confine them to a hospital bed for a couple weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Number 4, finding some way, some rule in the somewhere in the NBA rules where we can make it so Dolan owns the team instead. I'm sure Dolan would make sure they did not get that. That it did not work out. Steph Curry for Bargs and a draft pick.
Yeah.
I don't think I have a fifth one. Jay, you have any ways to stop Golden State?
Replace the floorboards with trampolines like slam ball. I just want to make a slam ball reference. I missed that stuff.
Yeah, the whole point of this article basically is there is nothing you can do. And so the only thing you can resort to is basically flagrantly illegal things.
I got another one. Get Tom Brady to deflate the ball. I bet the dribbling would not look so good if they couldn't dribble.
That's good. I'm going to have to add a six ways you can stop them. I mean, the Tom Brady peg alone is going to be worth 1 million clicks.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
So the Cauldron. The Cauldron is where you could find Jim's articles, and JPCAVAN is the Twitter. So follow Jim on Twitter for some good tweets.
If you could also do some research to figure out how his name should be pronounced, please let us know.
I would love to know. I'm also happy to know that I have some good tweets.
You do. You're one of the few people I actually don't regret following.
I've stepped off my game recently, but it's always a pleasure, Jason, Mark. Thanks for having me on. Hope to do it before the end of the season so we can kind of decompress and talk about all this stuff anew and where we're going forward.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's touch base near the end of the season.
Hopefully next time we're talking, we're like, yeah, Rambis is a genius. I'm not being sarcastic.
Sasha hit
Hopefully.
I can't believe Sasha's been averaging a triple-double since we last talked.
All right, Jim. Great talking to you again. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Talk to you soon.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
I'm going to play the goodbye song.
Bye, love. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. It's all over. Goodbye. It's time to go. This is the end. Say goodbye. You better go away. I'm gonna leave you. It's the end. Goodbye. Goodbye. Just leave me alone. Feels so good to say goodbye. I'm sick and tired and I'm saying goodbye. Goodbye, girl. Goodbye, everybody.
Hi, this is moreLearn Morrison, here to tell you Geico has more than just great savings. Much more. Geico's been around for more than 75 years, back when they were using Morse code. Sorry, that's just my sense of humor. What's more, with Geico you get 24/7 access to licensed agents on the app, online, or over the phone, so you can talk to them at night or in the morning. So forevermore, just know that no other auto insurer has more than Geico. More power to you. Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.